welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my June reading wrap up, which is probably slightly less things than I would like, although I'm still ahead of schedule in terms of my overall reading goal. I finished eight things I think, in June, and they were mostly Hugo related, which is good. Which means my writers of colour is way up because there were five things out of the 8 that I read were writers of colour. So yeah, Hugo Awards. They're all fairly short things, all ebooks, because there was only one thing in here that wasn't Hugo related, and it's still an ebook. So yeah, there are other things that I got partway through, but yeah, nothing else that I actually finished. So still a decent reading month. I'm quite pleased with what I achieved. There was a lot of rereading, let's face it, rereading Austen Variations that I've already read this year. There was a lot of comfort reading in June, so that continues apace. But I was also very distracted because first half of June is Quantum Bang release for one of the fan fiction groups that I keep an eye on, and so I was reading a lot of that, a lot of very long, decently long fan fiction stories during the first half of June as well, so that was distracting. Anyway, what did I read? So the first thing I finished was I Am AI by Ai Zheng. So this was a translated work. There's a lot of translated works because there are quite a few translated works from Chinese authors, I'm assuming because last year's Worldcon was in China. So this one was kind of interesting. I think it's on the novelette ballot. I can't remember exactly. But it's sort of like a future world and sort of explores the idea of where is the line and the ethical line and the artistic line between turning yourself into an AI and like the authenticity of your work. If you, for example, remove your heart and change it with a battery, and is that a good thing, or where's that line drawn between authentic human creation and AI? So it was kind of interesting. Then I read Ivy Angelica Bay by C.L. Polk, which was a very nice sort of fantasy story about a woman whose mother had just died, leaving her in charge of the magical web that looks after their neighbourhood. And there was something trying to encroach on said neighbourhood. And there's sort of the ideas about motherhood in there as well, and creation and life and that kind of thing. Then I read On Fox Roads by Nevo. I really like Nevo's work, and this one was, I didn't love it as much as I love the Singing Mount Hills series, but it was essentially a early 20th century historical sort of Bonnie and Clyde style story, but with magical backroads. Yeah, so that help people escape. So yeah, it was interesting. Then I read Better Living Through Algorithms by Naomi Kritzer, which was an exploration of just because an algorithm is doing something, does that necessarily mean it's a bad thing? So it was essentially about signing up for an app, and no one really knew who created the app, but it would essentially start running your life for you and just making suggestions. But, and you'd start interacting with other people because based on suggestions, and then the fallout when it discovers the whole thing was just a big experiment by a university, and so people stop using the app, but then they start missing the bits of their life that the app gave them and how to reclaim that without actually using the app. So, yeah, it was an interesting explanation of algorithms and online community, and how that reflects into the real world, and how, yeah, it was interesting. I liked it. So then we finally get to the thing that wasn't for the Hugos, and that was Blended Bennets by Victoria Lynn. This is an Austen variation, and this particular one, the Mr. Bennet that we know is actually a younger son who went into trade and married a Scottish lass who had her own estate, and had a business with like blended whiskies, blah blah blah. Has a son, and Lizzie is his daughter, and then his brother dies, and he has to go to Longbourn to look after Mrs. Bennet and her 4 daughters, and it becomes a blended family, and how that works when you then meet the Darcys and the Bingleys. And then I read Introduction to 2181 Overture, 2nd edition by Gucci. This one was structured like the introduction to a book. And it was about sort of time travel, but time travel as in using cryogenics and the evolution of the science of cryogenics, and its use. Yeah, it was sort of interesting. I didn't love it as much as some of the other stuff that I've read, but it was still sort of interesting. So, that was definitely worth a read. Then I read The Sound of Children Screaming by Rachel K. Jones, which I didn't particularly like. It's a horror story. And it's a horror story that hits far, far too close to home because it's about school shootings. And portaling to another world, but realizing as the teacher of the children that have gone through this portal, which is the only way they can try and escape the school shooting that's in the midst of happening, to a world where the children are then expected to become violent and fight the war for the people, mice, that live in this new world. And the perpetuation of violence and solutions that aren't really solutions. It was very uncomfortable, and it really wasn't my cup of tea. And then I finished off the month by finishing Answerless Journey by Han Song, which is another translated work. And this one was, I didn't particularly like this one either. It was a story where 2 characters wake up with no memories in a spaceship with no way to leave, and no knowledge of who they are, what they are, or anything like that. And it very, very much felt like using human beings as an experiment. And an experiment that's going to go bad because it's 2 people with no memory trapped in a small space with no way of leaving. And eventually they're going to turn against each other. Because, yeah, meditation of human nature is human nature. And it always devolves to the worst. So that wasn't a particularly fun read either. But I have now, with those and with a few other things so far this month, I have now finished the short story category. I have finished the novelette category, and I'm working on the novella category. Probably not going to be able to do it much with the Lodestar Award, which I was hoping to. I'm about 2/3 of the way through one of Garth Nix's books, which is the first book in the series where the second book is in the Lodestar. But there's probably less than 2 weeks left until it's the 7th, and I think voting closes on the 20th, something like that. So yeah, I'm probably not going to have enough time. I've still got 4 more novellas to read, so yeah, that's probably not going to work. But I'm still reasonably, even though I didn't quite hit the 10 a month, I'm still reasonably happy with what I read during June. It was managing to break myself away from, constant Austen variations, even though I was still reading those, but I actually read some other stuff, which is good. At least one of those stories had characters I would consider queer, at least gender non-conforming. And a bunch, like I said, a bunch of them were authors of color, which is great. That's good. Hugo work. But yeah, I'm still, like I said, I'm still ahead of schedule with my overall. I think I'm like 7 books ahead of schedule, so I'm doing pretty well. I'm really doing pretty well. That's great. So yeah, always happy to talk about these sort of stories in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.